Hi, I'm back. Listen, we've got some really deep stuff to talk about today, and I've got my phone off to the side because I am going to talk about some different things, and I want to make sure I get it in the chronological order. I have my tissue because it's probably going to happen, and I just started an 8-day jumpstart today. I have the privilege of, in our conference for Xyngular in about a week and a half, I get to speak on stage about something that I'm really good at, which is retention. And so I have my big jug of water. I've got to get a gallon of water in every day, and just eating really clean. It was my birthday this last week. So, we ate some things. I went to the fair, had some cotton candy and a corny dog, things that I shouldn't be eating, but you gotta live a little too, right? So, I decided that I was going to start an 8-day today. So that's why you got the jug of water and all that good stuff. But if you ever decide you want to try that with me, just let me know. You're going to lose 5 to 15 pounds in 8 days. And that's how I've lost all my weight and stuff. But I want to make sure I'm just like real trim and tight for being on stage in front of everybody. So anyway, I want to tell you about a time in my life when I met my youngest son's dad. And I know this isn't really in chronological order or anything, but I think that it just speaks volumes for different, just different times in my life. Nothing's ever going to go chronological with me because I'm a squirrel. I'm all over the place. And this will probably be too. So that's why I have my phone, just to kind of keep me on track. So I lived in Dallas at the time with my oldest son, Brighton. He was 5 years old. And I came to Tyler to hang out with a friend of mine and also to go on a date. And it was a Saturday night. I don't even know if I should say who it is. I don't know if he'd ever listen to this, but it was a date with Little Paul. He's a tattoo artist here. And Little Paul, I'd been wanting to go out with him forever and ever and ever and ever. I thought he was just so beautiful and just such a cool guy. And he stood me up that night. So I appreciate that, just in case you're listening. Best thing, right? So I decided to go to Shooters, meet up with my best friend at the time, Dixie, and go to Shooters. And so I'm in Shooters, we're hanging out, like her brother's got some friends and stuff, and we're all hanging out and having some drinks and playing pool. And I look up and this guy walks in, and he has the prettiest smile that I've probably ever seen in my life, right? And he walks in and I'm like, oh God, I'm in trouble, right? So turns out that he was the friend of a brother, or he was the brother of one of Dixie's brother's friends. And he had known me from a long time ago, but he's a lot younger than me. And I didn't realize that. Like, he shouldn't have even been in the bar. He was only 20. I thought surely he was at least 21 because I was 26 at the time. So straight up cougar moment. Anyway, we hung out, got to know each other, and it was head over heels for me and him both. And I found out later he had a crush on me since he was like 16, and he wasn't much older than that anyway. But anyway, I was in love. Okay. And so we dated. Like, I would come to Tyler and see him, or he would come to Dallas and see me, whatnot. So that's how Gage's dad and I met. I was planning a trip down here. We were going to go to Galveston for the weekend and like just go take the kids to the beach and stuff. And I got in the car that day and I had Brighton. And like I said, Brighton was about 5 years old. And here's the thing, right? So Brighton was real small for his age. Like really small. He was in like the 30th percentile for growth. He was just, I don't know, he was just small for his age. Like, we ended up doing growth hormone injections for him because at the age of 9, he was about the size of a 6-year-old. So he was in the car, and Brighton still was in a car seat because he was so small that he wasn't at that weight limit that I was comfortable just sitting him in the back seat, right? So we're driving, and my anxiety is already built up about this. It's been a crazy day today already anyway. So we're driving, and it starts raining, and we're on I-20, and I'm driving faster than I should. And there's a big truck, like a semi, next to me. And he honks his horn as I pass him. Well, what I couldn't see, because I was so low, I was in like an Oldsmobile Alero, what I couldn't see was what he could see ahead of me. And that's why he was honking for me to slow down. And there was just this sheet of rain that came down up over this hill. I will never forget the sound of that rain hitting the windshield. I mean, it was just, it came out of nowhere. And so I'm trying to slow down, and that truck had already passed me. Well, what was next to me was a flatbed semi-trailer, and there was nothing on his flatbed. I'd run a trucking company, so I was pretty familiar with accidents in big trucks. So my car started hydroplaning, and I could feel the back end on the right headed into the semi. Like, here's the semi flatbed, and like my car's doing this, right? And Brighton is on this side of the car. So I cut the wheel into the median, right? I mean, I just cut the wheel because I wanted off of that highway. We hit the grass, and it was wet, and then we went faster. And for some reason, there was a lady that was pulled over. Instead of being pulled over on the shoulder, she was pulled over in the median. And we hit her truck going about 65 miles an hour. And she was at a dead stop. I'd never been in a car accident like that before. I'd never been in a wreck or anything to where an airbag deployed. So my first instinct was when we wrecked, it totally pushed her truck. Like, the groceries that were in the back of her truck were up in like the hood of my car. And it totally spun her truck the opposite direction and back behind our car. And so when I opened my door, she was outside her truck on the other side of the median screaming at me like, I had my flashers on. I had my flashers on. And I was like, I couldn't stop, right? I mean, the brakes did nothing in wet grass. And so I thought the car was on fire because there was so much smoke. And I know now that was like powder from the airbag and stuff. But Brighton was in a 5-point harness system. And you know how they talk about like how moms can, like the adrenaline, they can like pick up cars off their kids and stuff. So I picked up this kid, and mind you, he didn't weigh a whole lot, but like I reached in the back seat, undid a 5-point harness in like with one hand, and picked him up and had him over me and out of the car, but like before I ever even got out of the car. I found my phone on the floorboard. The whole windshield was crushed. And it was still pouring down rain. And there was a lady on the shoulder that saw the wreck happen, and she rolled her window down and she said, come get in the car with us. So we got in the car with her. She called 911, and we were okay, right? The paramedics came and they checked us out. And the paramedics told me that if Brighton hadn't been in a car seat, it probably, the seatbelt probably would have decapitated him from where it would sit on him. So thank God I still had him in a car seat. That day there were 17 wrecks on that stretch of I-20. It was that bad. And now they actually have concrete barriers blocking, like to keep you from going into the median or anything like that. But I still believe that if that lady, I don't know if you ever hear this one day, thank you for being parked there. And I'm glad you and your son were okay. But if you hadn't have been there, we would have gone into oncoming traffic. I mean, because I had no control of the car. So the tow trucks came, the paramedics came, it stopped raining. And like I said, there were like 17 wrecks that day. So traffic was backed up, especially headed west. And that was how, like, I called. Gage wasn't even conceived yet, right? But his dad was my boyfriend at the time. So I called him and I let him know what happened. And his mom and stepdad and him hopped in the truck and headed this way, headed towards where we were. We were probably about 25 miles from Tyler. I remember sitting there waiting for someone to come, right? Waiting for someone to get there, waiting for Gage's dad to get there. And you couldn't get around traffic. Sorry, I'm like reliving this as I'm talking to you about this, because I haven't thought about this stuff in a long time. So don't let me lose you, okay? Because there's too much importance. So I see him, right? And I see the truck, and he knows there's no way that the truck's going to get to me. So he gets out of the truck and he runs across the highway. He like runs across the interstate and through the median and across the rest of the interstate to get to me. And it was a moment in time that I thought he was my hero. And I was so in love with this guy. And I had no idea he was a meth addict. I had no idea that was what I was bringing into my son's life. Brighton's at the time. He hit it really well. And he hit it really well for a long time. And then I moved to Tyler. Like I said, he hit it really well. I moved to Tyler, left Dallas, moved to Tyler, got a job in Tyler. And Gage's dad and I moved in together. And about, 4 months later, I was pregnant with Gage. And gosh, that was hard, because I had, when I had found out I was pregnant, a lot of other stuff came out about him being a meth addict. And I had actually kicked him out of the house at one point. And that was brutal. That was brutal for Brighton. I remember he was sitting outside on the patio, and Brighton took him a little stuffed animal to make him feel better. Just hard stuff, because you don't want to see your kids hurt. And, Brighton's dad hadn't been around for him at all. So that was hard, to make another person leave, but they weren't good for him. They weren't good. He wasn't good for us. Anyway, we stayed together on and off during my pregnancy, and I had Gage, and the night that I had Gage, like I knew when I made the decision to have Gage that I was going to be a single mom of 2 kids. Like I knew it. I knew it was going to be hard, but I couldn't imagine not having him. Gosh, y'all, I'm a mess. I'm sorry. I couldn't imagine not having him. So I was in the hospital, and like I said, I knew I was going to be a single mom. My first son's last name was hyphenated with my last name because I knew I was going to be a single mom. And I did the same thing with Gage because I knew I was going to be a single mom with 2 kids. And his dad was real pissed off about that. And he actually left me, took my car, and left me in the hospital by myself right after I'd had Gage, like that night. And I remember the nurses coming in to take Gage, and so I could sleep. Because I was in labor for like 12 and a half hours with him. He was 8 pounds, 14 ounces. He was a big baby. And I was in labor for quite a while. I was tired. And they finally came in, and about, I don't know, about 5 hours later and said, Miss Judd, we're sorry to have to wake you up, but we know that, he's hungry, he needs to eat, and you don't want to bottle feed him, so he needs to nurse. And that was, I knew that I didn't want to marry a man like that. We had plans to get married. He asked me to marry him. I said yes. I had the envelopes. I had the invitations ready to go, right? We ordered invitations. We had everything set up. We were going to get married like before the baby was born. And I got to the mailbox at the post office. I could not put the envelopes. I couldn't mail them. I couldn't do it. I left the post office with the box of wedding invitations because I knew if I married that man, I would end up divorced. And I didn't want to end up, and I don't mean this derogatory towards my mom, but I didn't want to end up like my mom, married and divorced 3 times. I didn't want that for myself. I wanted to find the right person, right, and get married one time, and that's it. So I want to make sure I'm not getting off track. So that was kind of the thing. We met, we had a baby, and then we went separate ways. He went to jail for quite a while of Gage's life, about 10 months. And then I just knew I couldn't marry a man like that. I couldn't do it. And that was devastating to me because I had all these plans, in my head, everything planned out. And that day that he came across that highway, I thought that was my hero, and the crazy thing is now is to this day, like, I said a minute ago, I'd never unhear the sound of that rain hitting the windshield. There's just things that trigger you. And so even now to this day, I can't drive on an interstate in the rain. Like, you have to drug me for me. Like, I will be in the floorboard of the car if I hear the rain like that. And I've been in situations where it wasn't supposed to rain and it did rain on me on the interstate, and I've had to pull over or white knuckle it or cry my eyeballs out all the way through it. And I guess that's what you call PTSD. But it's for real. I mean, I can't even pretend with that. That's probably one of the scariest things in the world for me. I drive around all day long in the rain in town. But if you put me on an interstate at high rates of speed, I'm a basket case. It's terrible. I just asked my husband. He hates it. Ask the kids. They hate it. They dread it, right? So to this day, no driving in the rain on an interstate for me. And that was 20 years ago when that happened. So I want to come full circle with this because there's a reason I'm telling this story. When I met Danny, I think I had said in a couple of podcasts before that Gage's dad would kind of stalk the house and stuff. And he was still using meth and there were still problems, and he would stalk the house. And so we had to be real careful where Danny parked and things like that. But we got through all of that stuff. And Danny asked me to marry him. And of course I said yes, because that was, he's the one. And so I picked out a wedding dress at a place called Alfred Angelo in Dallas. And I drove to Dallas to go pick up my dress, stayed with a friend that night. And when I was driving home, I was driving past that part of the interstate, right? Mile marker 552 in Lindale. I know exactly where it is. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks that I was marrying someone else. And I don't think that I ever grieved because there was so much drama and so much trauma surrounding Gage's dad that I don't think that I ever grieved the loss of that relationship. And then when I had a meltdown on I-20. I had to pull over. I was crying so hard because, I passed that spot where this person who I thought was my hero was coming running towards me to save the day. And that's who I thought I was going to marry. And here I am with a wedding dress, marrying someone else. And, I felt so guilty because why am I crying over this other person when I have this person, Danny, that I love so much? And then I felt guilty because I didn't want to be a mom with two baby daddies. I thought surely I could make it work with one of them, for my kids' sake. And thank God I didn't, right? I told y'all it's a total mess today. So I'm driving down the highway. I finally get back on the road and I make it home. And Danny was in the kitchen. And I walked in the door. And he just looked at me and he said, "Are you okay?" Because he could tell I'd been crying. If there's anyone that's like so in tune with me and my feelings, it's that man. Sorry. I knew once this started, it wasn't going to be easy. So I walk in and he knows I'm not okay. And I said, "No, I'm not okay." And I just fell in his arms and cried. And I told him kind of what happened. And do you know that this man is so good that he let me grieve the loss of another man on his shoulder? Who does that? Who gets that lucky to have someone like that? I don't know any other man in my life that would have let me cry about another man on their shoulder. Like, unless it was just like a friend, right? And it's like in that moment, it's like, the trajectory of like everything happens for a reason. And I knew in that moment that I was marrying the right person, And Cage's dad wasn't my hero. Danny was my hero. And I never thought that I deserved someone like him. Because I'd always dated guys that, I don't know, I was always the breadwinner in the relationship. I was always the responsible one in a relationship. I was always, they never had a car. Sometimes they had a job. Like, I would just take them and think I can turn them around and fix them and they're going to love me enough to where, you know what I'm talking about, girls. You think you can change them. And the reality is that you can't. I mean, people are who they are. And when someone shows you who they are, believe them. And in that moment, Danny showed me who he was. And so I was 32 years old when Danny and I, 31, 32 years old when we met. So to any of you that are out there listening and you're in relationships that are abusive and you're in relationships that aren't good for you, aren't good for your kids, or you're involved with someone who's an addict, you have to know that you have to get away from it. You have to leave. And you have to know that, yeah, maybe you'll be alone for a little while, but you're going to be okay. And, God can't bring that person into your life without you allowing that person to come into your life, and getting rid of all the bad. And so I say that because I think there's so many people that are just stuck. And I think I could have easily stayed stuck in that, right? I mean, because as much as Gage's dad was an addict, there were moments, right? You look for those moments and you live for those little moments that, like, oh yeah, there's a really good-hearted guy there, you know? I don't see it very often, but I know it's there. And maybe if I just love him enough, he'll change. That's the biggest bullshit you've ever fed to yourself. That's the biggest bullshit I've ever fed to myself, for sure. It doesn't work that way. Relationships don't work that way. And I have learned, I've learned the hard way, very much so over time. If any of you ever get in a car with me, any of my friends or my people, and it starts raining, you know why now I freak out. That accident will live with me forever. And I don't think I've ever had bruises like that in my life ever either. And I know this is supposed to be about, some self-help and some recovery. And I guess I just don't want you to give up. Don't give up that there's someone good out there for you. Don't settle, okay? Because that's where I was. I was just going to settle. I was just going to settle that this was my life, and I loved him sometimes. And yeah, we fought like, I don't even know what the word, like betas. I mean, we fought so much. Get out of that. Get out of that for your kids. Don't put your kids through that. It's not fair. They don't deserve that. And sometimes it's hard to leave. It's hard to leave a habit. Habits are hard to break. And there was a long time that my husband now, I mean, we didn't have the greatest, right? I've talked about that. We split up for a short period of time as well. But, I don't know. It's just all going to be okay. And I think that's just what I want to put out there is no matter what situation you're in, you can get out of it. Okay. You're not stuck. Nobody's stuck. You're a decision away from getting out. Ask for help, right? Or just leave. And I promise you that God will find a way for you and your kids. I don't know if this helped anyone today or not. I don't know if me reliving that and bawling my eyeballs out helped or not. But life isn't easy. And it's never going to be easy. There's always going to be something. There's always going to be trials and tribulations that we go through. But how we react to those things that happen to us, that's our agency. And I don't know if you've ever heard it put in that term before. I hadn't until a couple of years ago. But like your agency is how you react to things that are put in front of you. I don't think I had a lot of emotional maturity at that point in life. I think I've learned a lot more emotional maturity, and obviously we get that as we grow in our 30s and 40s and 50s because, well, some of us do. But emotional intelligence and emotional maturity, if you don't have that, you should look into self-development books like that. Darren Hardy is someone that I listen to all the time. We did like their hero's journey and things like that. And it was really, really good. And part of it is, you don't believe in yourself. And that's where that self-development comes in. And that, like in my first podcast, I talked about that I am board. Repeat those good things to yourself every single day, because I didn't even do that back then. I didn't think I deserved that. And the thing is, we're all deserving of good things. You're deserving of good things. I'm deserving of good things. Our family's deserving, our kids, right? So just don't forget that. Thanks for listening. I don't even know how long this was, but Thanks for bearing with me through it and getting it out. I'm going to have a really cool guest in a couple of weeks. Until then, I'm going to just feed you a little bit more. Probably next week, I'll talk about my other baby daddy. That would be Brighton's dad. I didn't make the best choices in life, but man, God gave me some amazing kids with these men. So thank you to these men for these amazing kids. They're more than I could ever ask for. And my bonus kids too. They're pretty great. So anyway, you guys have a great day. Thanks for listening to all that with me. And I'll talk to y'all later. Peace out, homies.